Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode in Hult International Business School's webinar series. Today's episode is Triggers, Becoming the Person You Want to Be. My name is Darren Lockery, and I am the Associate Director of Enrollment for the MBA program on our Boston campus. Joining us today is Dr. Marshall Goldsmith, who is the author of the New York Times and Wall Street Journal #1 bestseller, Triggers. Dr. Goldsmith is the world authority in helping successful leaders achieve positive, lasting change in behavior for themselves and for others. In 2015, he was recognized as the #1 leadership thinker in the world and the top-rated executive coach at the Thinkers 50 ceremony in London. He is author or editor of 35 books and is the #1 New York Times best-selling author of Triggers, Mojo, and What Got You Here Won't Get You There. His books have sold over 2 million copies, have been translated in 30 languages, and have become bestsellers in 12 countries. Throughout his career, Dr. Goldsmith has been one of the few executive advisors that has been asked to work with over 150 major CEOs and their management teams. He is a fellow in the National Academy of Human Resources and winner of the Lifetime Achievement in Teaching Award from the Institute for Management Studies. His work has been recognized by almost every professional organization in his field. Today's webinar covers a topic that we can all learn from to improve both our professional and our personal lives. It is about creating behaviors that last and help us transform into the person we truly want to be. The webinar will be fast-paced and interactive, so throughout Dr. Goldsmith's presentation, you will be able to submit any responses to his questions in the questions box, so please feel free to share. And we will also allow for some Q&A at the end of the presentation. So again, feel free to type your questions in the question box. Now I would like to hand the floor over to Dr. Marshall Goldsmith. Marshall, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I will briefly introduce myself and we will begin. My name is Marshall. I'm from a small town in Kentucky called Valley Station, Kentucky. Went to undergraduate school at a little engineering school, Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology, got an MBA at Indiana, a PhD at UCLA. I was a college professor and dean when I was very, very young. Then for the past 39 years, I've done three things. One is I give talks or teach classes, and I travel all around the world speaking and teaching. I've been to 96 countries. By the end of this year, I'll be up to 99. I have over 11 million frequent flyer miles on just American Airlines. Then the second thing I do, which I'm most famous for, is I coach executives. And my coaching clients are CEOs or could be CEOs of huge companies. So I've been the CEO, the coach of Ford, Pfizer, Glaxo, Walmart, the president of the World Bank, the head of the Mayo Clinic, all kinds of wonderful people. And what I love about coaching is that's where I learn everything. Most of what I'm teaching today, I learned through coaching. And then the final thing I do is write and edit books and articles, and I do videos. And if you ever go online, you can go to YouTube. 120 of my videos are online, or go to my website, www.marshallgoldsmith.com. I give everything away. All my material, you may copy, share, download, duplicate, use in church, charity, nonprofit, any way that you wish. And also, if you'd like to send me an email, marshall@marshallgoldsmith.com, please send me an email. If you send me an email, I cannot promise to get back to you immediately. I will promise to get back to you eventually. It just might take a little while. Now, let's get started. Let's go to the next slide. What are our goals? Well, our first goal is to understand the concept of triggers, how we create the world and how it creates us at the same time. Understand why we don't achieve our goals. I'm going to talk about that, what holds us back, some of our delusions and beliefs. An integrated approach to planning life and business, which I think you'll find very practical and useful. You can use it in your own life or coaching others. I'm going to share something called the daily question process, and particularly active questions. I'm going to share something that takes maybe 3 or 4 minutes a day, costs nothing, it's going to help you get better at almost anything. Now, some of you are skeptical right now. You're thinking 3 or 4 minutes a day, costs nothing, help me get better at almost anything. That sounds too good to be true. I'm also going to predict at least half the people that do this will quit within 2 weeks. And we don't quit because it doesn't work. We quit because it does work. Everything I'm going to teach you in this webinar is going to be simple. It's going to be easy to understand. That does not mean it's easy to do. And then finally, how can we apply these key concepts to help have better lives and be better coaches and help others achieve more success? Let's go to the next slide. What happens? Now, my general theory in life is as we journey through life, we know the person we want to be. If I ask you to describe that perfect you would describe this nice person, good with the family, very professionally active, perfect physical condition, yada, yada, yada. We all know this person that we want to become. What happens? Why don't we become this person? Millions of people around the world are disengaged, depressed, not achieving personal goals. Many teams and organizations are dysfunctional. Next slide. Why is change so difficult? New Year's resolutions. By February, the gym is empty. Coaching clients just give up sometimes. Why do we fail every day on some of these little things? Next slide. What's a trigger? As we journey through life, we are constantly bombarded by triggers. What is a trigger? Any stimulus may impact our behavior. Could be a sight, a sound, a word, a person. In some cases, these triggers push us toward becoming the person we want to be. In most cases, these triggers push us away from becoming the person we want to be. So we'll talk a little bit about how to understand this. Next slide. A simple model for who's in control in life. External control means that basically as we journey through life, we are controlled by the environment around us. External control. Internal control means that we control it ourselves. If we look at high and low on internal and external, we can look at 4 views of life. By the way, very bright people believe in each one of these 4 views. And then I'll share the one that I'm going to talk about in triggers. The first one is the random walk theory of life. Life is a random crapshoot. It doesn't make a lot of sense externally or internally. Chaos theory. Number 2 is high on internal control, but low on external control. I create the world. And this is epitomized by, for example, the motivational speech. If you've ever been to a motivational speech, they're always the same. Jimmy was tired and poor and sick, and people said, Jimmy, you cannot do it. And Jimmy worked hard, and he never had a date, but now Jimmy's rich, and he has 3 wives. The motivational speech is pretty much always the same. Well, it's the motivational speech says, I am in control of my world. If I believe it, I can do it. This is ultimately epitomized by a ridiculous book called The Secret, a book that sold over 7 million copies. And the essence of the book, The Secret, is if I envision it, it will happen. Well, there's a minor problem. Everything they said in the book was true. Mary envisioned becoming a movie star, and she is. Jim envisioned his cancer would go away, and it did. There's only one minor problem from a research point of view. They didn't interview the dead people. They didn't interview all the people who envisioned their cancer would go away and they died. And they didn't interview the 1,000 waitresses in Hollywood who envisioned being movie stars and they didn't become movie stars. This is called the survivor bias in research. So I believe that it's great to envision success. It's great to think positively, but to naively believe I'm some kind of little God who can create the world around me is a little bit of a stretch. The opposite is B.F. Skinner, the famous Harvard psychologist, believed the world creates me. His theory of life is that we are constantly being bombarded by triggers, and we're like a stimulus response machine, and we just respond to the world around us and ultimately become creations of our world. Now, next slide. What I teach in the book Triggers is mutual creation. What does this mean? I am creating my world. So I do believe we have impact on our world. I don't believe we're just like the Pavlovian dogs that are responding to stimulus around us. Triggers in my world are creating me. We're not gods. I'm creating it, and at the same time, it is creating me. Next slide. Fate. Fate is the hand of cards that we've been dealt. And in any second in time, we have been dealt a hand of cards. And the one thing in life we can never change is the past. You cannot change the hand you've been dealt at any second in time. The hand is what it is. We have choice, though. Choice is, how do we play the hand that we have been dealt? Next slide. The idea is changing the impact of triggers. Typically, there is a trigger. The trigger does lead to an impulse, and that impulse drives our behavior. The goal of my book is to realize there will always be triggers. We will always have an impulse. This is not feeling or thought patrol saying you can't think or feel a certain way. The key, though, is to become aware, to become mindful of what's going on around us and realize I have a choice. And if possible, have our behavior become a function of the conscious choice, not the unconscious impulse. Next slide. Dealing with triggers. Now, the negative case study. In my classes, I have a humorous example I always use. I talk about our constant need to win too much. And as an extreme example, I ask, has this ever happened to you? You have a hard day at work, a hard day. You go home, your husband, wife, or partner is there, and the other person says, I had such a hard day today. I had such a tough day. And we're so competitive, we say, you had a hard day. You had a hard day. Do you have any idea what I had to put up with today? Do you think you had a hard day? Well, we're so competitive, we have to prove we're more miserable than the people we live with. I gave this example at a class at Dartmouth Tuck School where I teach. A young man in the back raised his hand. He said, I did that last week. I asked him what happened. He said, my wife looked at me. She said, honey, you just think you've had a hard day. It's not over. Well, that's the negative case study. Now for the positive case study. I got an email that's in the book Triggers. I got an email a couple of years ago, and if any of you would ever send me such an email based on our little talk today, I'd be very proud we had this talk. The email said, I know you don't know me. I was in your class about 5 years ago. I'm sure you can't remember me. This gentleman said, I want to send you an email today and say thank you. He said, yesterday I was having a tough day. I was under a lot of pressure. I was kind of stressed out. And my wife called me on the phone, and she was talking about what a hard day she was having. And I was looking at my watch, and I was just getting ready to point out how her problems paled in significance to my own. He said, for some reason, I remembered your little class, and I took a deep breath, and I thought, this is my wife. This is not the enemy. And I said, I love you. Thank you for everything you have done for the family. I appreciate all the sacrifices you've been making. He said, I went home, I spent $25, and I bought her some flowers. I gave her the flowers, and I said, I love you. He said, it was the best $25 I've ever spent. Thank you very much. Well, that email is kind of the goal of the book. There will always be triggers, and we'll always have impulses. To the degree we can stop and breathe and think, I have a choice. And let that behavior be a function of our conscious choice. The more likely we are to become the person we want to be, not the person who's being created by the world around us. Next slide. We live in a perfect storm of distraction. Email, cell phones, tablets, texting, on-demand TV, movies, games, multitasking. Now, everyone, if do any of you have teenagers, I'd like to particularly listen to what I'm going to say next. I wrote an article 20 years ago, and I made a prediction. I was correct. I wish I'd been wrong. 20 years ago, I said within 20 years, media addiction will far surpass drug addiction and alcohol addiction combined as a social problem. We are there. Media addiction around the world is an epidemic disease. Over 100 million people in China have been diagnosed with having some form of media addiction. Video games, Facebook, something. We can get lost in a world of distraction. Now, if you have teenagers, listen closely to what I'm saying. I mean, the average kid that's flunking out of school in America spends 55 hours a week on non-academic media. The young man driving me back and forth from the airport to Dartmouth College flunked out of school. He guesstimated he'd spend about 25,000 hours of his life playing a video game called World of Warcraft. 25,000 hours playing a video game. Now, I want everyone that can to respond and use the question box and just answer this question. Do you have teenage kids? If you do, yes, just say, yes, I have teenage kids. If you don't have to respond. And then, do you worry about this? And how serious do you think this is, this potential for excessive use of non-academic media? So if we get any responses, if you can just interrupt and maybe read a couple of the responses to me, that'd be great. Yeah. Do you have kids and do you think about this? Well, I would suggest it's a big deal. It's a big deal.
Dr. Goldsmith,
Now,
one listener.
Yes.
We have a couple responses. The first is, I have an 8-year-old son and I'm already worried.
Very good.
And another listener, yes, I worry about this.
Yeah, I would say it's a very, very important thing to be thinking about. And I like the comment, I shouldn't have said teenagers. I should have just said children, because this doesn't start at teenage years now. It starts when they're much, much younger. So that's a very important point. Now, why don't people do what I teach? I'm going to make a prediction. I'm the only teacher you've ever met who's collected research from tens of thousands of people that have been to my courses, and I measure, do they do what I teach and do they get better? This is published in a research study called Leadership is a Contact Sport. If any of you would like a copy of this study, send me an email, Marshall with 2 L's, marshallgoldsmith.com, and I'll send it to you. It's 86,000 people from around the world. Why don't people do what I teach? Well, years ago, my biggest client was Johnson & Johnson, a wonderful company. I had the privilege of working with their top 2,000 leaders, all the way from Ralph Larson, who was the CEO at the time, down to number 2,000. At the end of my class, I asked a question. Are you going to do what Marshall just taught? Well, what I taught him wasn't complicated. Pick something to improve, talk to people, follow up, measure, and get better. 98% of the people said, I'm going to do what Marshall taught me. 98%. A year later, 70% had done something and 30% zero, not even 1 minute. Now, I'm not ashamed of these numbers. I'm proud of these numbers. 70% of 2,000 people is 1,400 people getting evaluated by 10 coworkers each. 14,000 people had a little better life. I'm certainly not ashamed of that. I got to interview the people that did nothing and ask them a question. Why'd you do nothing? Their answer had nothing to do with ethics, values, or integrity. They won an award that year, most ethical company in the world. They're good people. I'm sure you're good people. Nothing to do with intelligence, where they're smart people. I'm sure you're smart. The reason people did nothing had to do with a dream. And this is a dream I've had for years. I'm going to make a prediction. I'm going to predict many of you have had this dream. Many of you have had this same dream on a recurring basis for years, and it's going to describe why in life we don't do what we know we should. Some of you are skeptical now. You're thinking, he doesn't know my dreams. Don't bet against me. What's the dream sound like? You know, I'm incredibly busy right now, given pressures of work and home and new technology that follows me everywhere, and emails and voicemails and global competition. I feel about as busy as I ever have. Sometimes I feel overcommitted. I do not tell others this, but every now and again, my life feels just a little bit out of control. But you know, I'm working on some very unique and special challenges right now. And I think the worst of this is going to be over in about 4 or 5 months. And then I'm going to take 2 or 3 weeks and get organized and spend some time with the family. And I'm going to begin my new Healthy Life program. And everything's going to be different and it won't be crazy anymore. I'd like the listeners to respond if the answer is, have you ever had this dream? Yes or no? And number 2, how many years you've been having this same stupid dream? How many years you've been having the same stupid dream? Well, just send a response in. And while we're doing that, if you can go to the next slide. Now, have you got any responses yet?
We have a few. One is, so many of my clients have that dream. And then another listener wrote, tomorrow starts today.
That's good. That's very good. Now, why don't people... Go ahead, you got another one?
We do. We have quite a few more. One listener, about 7 years that I've had this dream. Yep, forever. Maybe for 2 decades.
a lot of dreaming going on out there. A lot of dreaming. Now, I'm going to share the classic delusions, the reasons we don't do what we know we should. One is called the planner bias. The planner bias, we assume the person doing the planning is the same as doing the executing. Wrong. That planner that wants to go on the healthy food diet is not the hungry doer staring at the chocolate cake. There's a big difference between the doer and the planner. There's a huge gap between I understand and I do. We like to believe in education, if people understand something, they're going to do it. Wrong. Everything I teach is easy to understand. It's real hard to do. We believe it won't take that long. It always takes longer than we think. It's always harder. A high probability of low probability distractions. What does that mean? When we plan our day, we never plan on a low probability distraction. We don't plan on the computer doesn't work or a car wreck or somebody dies or gets sick. Why? Because that's incredibly low in probability. Here's the problem. There are a million low probability distractions that can occur. And while the odds on any one specific one occurring are quite low, the odds on something happening are incredibly high. My favorite is today is a special day. Today is a special day. I'm going to go on a healthy food diet, but it's my birthday. Oh, it's my mother's birthday. It's the Super Bowl. It's the World Series. Well, if we're not careful, we can make almost every day some special day that justifies why we don't do what we know we should do. Next slide. We believe we have the wisdom and courage to objectively evaluate our own behavior. Wrong. 70% of us believe we're in the top 10% of our professional peer group. 82% of us believe we're in the top 20, and 98.5% of us believe we're in the top half. This is not a theory. This is a fact. We are totally not objective in evaluating our own behavior, and we don't have the courage to do it either. We believe we have willpower. Wrong. We believe we don't need help and structure. Wrong. We do need help and structure. I pay a woman to call me on the phone every day. Every day she listens to me read questions I wrote and provide answers I wrote. Why do I pay a woman every day? My name is Marshall Goldsmith. I'm the world's leading executive coach. I pay a woman to call me on the phone every day just to listen to me read questions I wrote and provide answers I wrote. Why do I do this? My name is Marshall Goldsmith. I'm too cowardly to do this by myself and too undisciplined. I need help, and it's okay. Once we get over that macho nonsense of I can do it on my own, life gets a lot better. Next slide. It's okay to need help and structure. One thing I'm very proud of in my book, Triggers, the book has been endorsed by 27 major CEOs. The reason I'm so proud is 30 years ago, no CEO would admit to having a coach. They'd be ashamed to have a coach. Well, today, these 27 important people have stood up and said, my name is Jim Kim. I'm the president of the World Bank. I need help. It's okay. My name is Mulally. I'm CEO of the United States. I need help. It's okay. Well, really getting the woman I had dinner with last night, my name is Frances Hesselbein. I won the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Got ranked as the greatest leader in the world. I still need help, and it's okay. Once people get over that macho nonsense, and we admit we need help, life is much more likely to get better. I'm typically teaching a class, and I'll say, who needs to be a better listener? Somebody raise their hand. I'll say, Joe, how many years you been needing to be a better listener? I'll say 30. Say, raise your hand and repeat after me. My name is Joe. I need to be a better listener. I have not fixed this by myself in 30 years. Who am I kidding? I'm not going to fix this by myself next week. I need help. And it's okay. It's okay. Next slide. The value of structure. Now, there's a great book called The Checklist Manifesto, published by Dr. Atul Gawande from Harvard Medical School. In his book, The Checklist Manifesto, Dr. Gawande makes a fascinating point. If you go in for a surgery and the nurse asks the doctor a series of very simple questions from a checklist before the surgery, the odds on unneeded infection plummet and the death rate because of unnecessary infection is cut by about 2/3. This is not a theory. It's a well-defined statistical fact. The huge majority of hospitals around the world do not allow the nurse to ask the doctor the questions. Why? Ego. The doctor is ashamed to say, I need help. Ego. According to Dr. Gawande, more people have died because of the egos of surgeons than died in the Vietnam War, the Afghan War, and the Iraqi War combined. Ego. Well, once we get over that ego stuff and admit we do need help and we do need structure, life is a lot better. And I'm going to give you some examples of ways that I see structure work and help all of us. Next slide. Now, my friend Alan Mulally did a fantastic job of turning around the Ford Motor Company. And he is a great example of the value of structure. First, he comes into Ford. The company is losing $17 billion with the B dollars. He said, the first thing we're going to focus on is leadership behavior. How do we treat each other as human beings? Well, the team agreed on a list of desired behaviors. Then Alan did something I've never seen a leader do. He said, all right, no tolerance for bad behavior starting today. Zero tolerance for bad behavior. Now, Alan used to run Boeing commercial aircraft before he went to Ford, so he was used to zero tolerance. In airplanes, you don't allow defects. People die. He said, and the same thing, behavior. We're not going to have bad behavior. Things like no putting people down, no cynicism, no sarcasm. We don't have time for that nonsense. One person didn't like it and goes over to Bill Ford and says, Bill, this is childish, Boy Scout nonsense. Can't make jokes about people. I can do whatever I want to do. Who is this guy? Bill Ford, the chairman, said, he's the CEO now. Go talk to him. Alan looked at him and said, I made a choice. You made a choice. Goodbye. One other guy went up to Bill Ford. Goodbye. After that, he only got rid of 2 people, and they, in essence, fired themselves. Now, Alan's success at Ford is unbelievable. The stock went from $1 to $18.40. And one statistic that really, to me, says it all, that's a union company. Union employees often don't love CEOs, and they really don't love CEOs that made $400 million like he did. When he left Ford, they all knew he was the CEO, and they all knew how much he made. He had a 97% approval rating from every employee in the company. They loved that guy. Why? He's a great leader. One thing he did, though, clear structure. People say it takes forever to turn around a corporate culture. Not in his case. Pretty simple stuff. He said, we're going to have some very clear structure. Here's the way we're going to treat each other. And by the way, if you don't want to treat people this way, it's fine. You have a choice. Go work someplace else. Amazingly effective. Then the second example is very deep in terms of getting over shame and creating honesty and transparency. The company is losing $17 billion. So he looks at the top 16 leaders and he said, all right, each of us pick 5 priorities. And we're going to focus on red, yellow, green. Green means I'm on plan. Yellow, I'm not on plan. I have a strategy to get there. And red means I'm not on plan. I have no strategy. So the first meeting, top 16 leaders, 5 priorities each, red, yellow, green, 80 green. Now the company is losing $17 billion with the B dollars, and everybody says we're on plan. Alan says, well, excuse me, we're losing $17 billion. And if we're on plan, and everybody's on plan on every priority, our plan must be to lose $17 billion. Why don't we do it again? Finally, Mark Fields, who's now the CEO of Ford, stands up and says, red. Alan stands up and applauds and says, thank you for having the courage to say red. You're not on plan, and you don't know how to get there. Red. God bless you. Thank you for having the courage to tell the truth. Now, he said something then very deep. He said, Mark, you're not on plan. You don't know how to get there. It's okay. He said, I'm the CEO of the Ford Motor Company. I know a lot less than you do on this topic, and that's okay, too. Why don't we get together as a team, pitch in, find some people that can help us and get this problem solved? We have hundreds of thousands of people who work for the company. We can hire somebody from the outside. Let's find some people who know what they're doing and solve the problem. Within about 10 minutes, the problem was largely solved. Why? Once people got over that egotistical, I don't need help, I'm above all this stuff nonsense, life is so much better. Well, that's how I turned the company around. Next slide. And then after that, the next slide. Now, eliminating shame. Alan's case study is a great case study of how to get over shame. I'm going to share the daily question process and talk about how that too can really help you eliminate this sense of guilt and shame and be much more likely to become effective. Next slide. Previous work on employee engagement. Now, I went to a presentation at the National Academy of Human Resources in the States, and they had a lot of top HR leaders, and they talk about the topic of employee engagement. And these are really bright people, and everything they said was good, and they talked about recognition, reward programs. And then they said, in spite of all efforts, global employee engagement is near an all-time low. Well, I'm thinking, wait a minute, if these people are so smart, and this all works so well, why is global employee engagement near an all-time low? Then I realized 100% of the dialogue is what can the company do to engage you, and 0% is what can you do to engage yourself. John Kennedy made a famous speech, and he said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. This was the John Kennedy speech in reverse. And by the way, when I say 100% and 0, I'm not exaggerating. 100% of engagement equation is what can the company do to engage you, and 0% you have any responsibility for your own life. Well, typical flight, there's 2 flight attendants on American Airlines. One's positive, motivated, upbeat, and enthusiastic. One's negative, bitter, angry, and cynical. Mm-hmm. Same plane.
I've all been there.
Same employee engagement program. What's the difference? Not the outside, it's what's going on the inside. So I'm thinking these people are missing half of an equation. Next slide. The Great Western Disease, I will be happy when. We have been bombarded with one message in our life. The Great Western art form, it sounds like this. You've seen it a million times. There's a person. The person is sad. They spend money. They buy a product and they become happy. It's called a commercial. I'm not sure you've ever seen one of those before, but there's a lot of them out there. The message of the commercial is always the same. I will be happy when. Happiness is out there in that product. Next slide. The great employee engagement myth. Okay, next slide. The great employee engagement myth is employees will be engaged when. When the company does this, employees are all going to start being engaged. Blue Jean Friday. That actually might increase engagement for a little bit, but after about 6 months, it's wallpaper. Today's gift is tomorrow's expectation. I'm going to teach you a different way of looking at engagement. And I do think companies should do whatever they can to help the employees be engaged. I also think employees can take a lot of responsibility for themselves. Next slide. Now I'm going to share a proven model to help you create the life you want to create. If we look at our life, think of positive, negative, change, and keep. We can form 4 dimensions. Creating, that's positive change. Preserving, that's positive keep. Then the next would be eliminating negative change. And then finally, accepting negative keep. I'm going to spend a little time on that one. Okay, next slide. The first place we're going to start is creating. Who is the you that you want to create in the future? And I really would like you to think about how you define yourself now. And then we're going to focus about the you that you want to be. Next slide. If we look at our identity, before we create the new me, how am I defining the old me? Well, our identity comes from a variety of places. One is our remembered identity. That is, I think I'm a bad tennis player. How do I know? I remember losing tennis matches, and these memories shape my identity. Our reflected identity. Well, I'm a bad listener. How do you know? Well, people told me I was a bad listener, and this feedback developed my identity. Our programmed identity, I'm going to spend a couple minutes on. We've all been programmed to believe we're a certain person. I was programmed to believe I was very smart, yet had no mechanical skills. So for 26 years of my life, I totally lived that out. I taught a class at a hospital, and a lot of our programming comes from our parents relative to our brothers and sisters. And in the hospital, I said, how many of you were programmed to believe you were the responsible one? And everyone in the room had their hand up. Well, we talked about the positive elements of being the responsible one, and then we talked about the dark side. People said things like, I always have to be responsible. The others know if they screw up, it's okay, I'll take care of it. I'm still responsible for my children, my siblings, and my parents. They got to have more fun than me. 2 people started crying. Well, think about the you've been programmed to be, and realize you don't have to play that out forever. We can always work on creating a new identity without being a hypocrite, without being a phony. One night I had dinner with the famous rock star Bono, and he really changed his identity to focus on being a humanitarian, not just a rock star, and it wasn't easy for him. But he realized that's who I want to be. And that doesn't mean I'm a hypocrite or a phony. It just means I've made a decision. I want to create a new identity, be a different person. I don't have to live out this person I've always been in the past. So in the first box, creating, think about who's that new you want to be. And probably a lot of the old you is great stuff you want to keep. But then on the other hand, maybe there's some changes you want to make. Positive change. Next slide. The next element in the wheel of change, preserving. Who's the you that you want to preserve? What is it you want to keep? One woman I had dinner with last night, her name is Frances Hesselbein, the greatest leader I ever met, was the CEO of the Girl Scouts for 14 years, did a spectacular turnaround of the Girl Scouts of America, and she had a motto, tradition with a future. She was always focused on the future, but she never put down the past. She said, never put down the past. Don't just focus on what you want to create. Always look at what you want to preserve. Right now, I'm in my condominium here in New York City, and here in New York, you see a lot of people get really focused on creating wealth, but they forget to preserve. They forget to preserve their health and their family, and sometimes what they fail to preserve is more important than what they do create. So if you plan your future, think about first, creating, who's the new me I want to become? And second, preserving. What is it about the old me that I want to save, preserve, or keep? Next slide. The next element is negative change. This is called eliminating. What is it you want to get rid of? Now, my book Triggers was the #1 New York Times business bestseller. It never made it to the #1 advice how-to list. It was #2 for, I think, 4 weeks. The #1 book was a book called The Magic of Tidying Up by a Japanese woman. And it was about what to get rid of in life. She talks about the importance of what do you want to get rid of? Because the problem is, if we just create and we just preserve, but we never eliminate, we become overcommitted. So as you plan that you want to be in life, think about not just what I want to create and preserve, what I want to get rid of. My biggest selling book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, is a popular book because it talks about what not to do. The great Peter Drucker taught me, we spend a lot of time helping leaders what to do, learn what to do. We don't teach them to learn what to stop. He said learning what to stop can be just as important as learning what to do. Next slide. And then the final element of the wheel of change is called accepting. What is it I need to just let go of? And I'm going to share some things again the wonderful Peter Drucker taught me. He said, #1, our mission in life is to make a positive difference, not to prove how smart we are, not to prove how right we are. He said, whoever has the power to make the decision is going to make the decision, make peace with that. If you need to influence the decision maker, one role to define you, salesperson, one word to define the decision maker, customer. He said, sell what you can sell. Change what you can change and make peace with what you cannot change. Next slide. Now, if you don't learn anything else in this whole webinar but this one thing, you're going to have a happier life, you're going to be better at making a positive difference, and you're going to have more peace. Before you deal with any topic, ask a question. Am I willing at this time to make the investment required to make a positive difference on this topic? Am I willing at this time to make the investment required to make a positive difference on this topic? If the answer is yes, go for it. If the answer is no, take a deep breath and let it go. Let it go. Let it go. We waste so much of our lives on stuff that doesn't matter. Movie stars, athletes, the weather. Here in my condominium in New York, one of my neighbors, a young woman named Lindsay Lohan. How many billions of hours were wasted people reading Lindsay Lohan got stoned or drunk or had a car wreck? Well, before you waste time on people like Lindsay Lohan, remember one thing. You may think Lindsay Lohan is a loser. She's not wasting her life reading about you. So it's always good to ask ourselves, am I going to make a difference here? If I am, go for it. If I'm not, take a deep breath and let it go. Let it go. Next slide. So if we look at the wheel of change, a great model is look at an individual, a team, an organization. What do we want to create? I've used this in teams. Who's the new team we want to become? What do we want to keep in the old team? From the past, from our old team, what is it we need to get rid of so we don't become constantly overcommitted? And finally, what do we need to make peace with? Just accept. A great model for looking at individuals, teams, and even a company. What does the organization need to create? What do we want to preserve? What do we need to get rid of? And what do we need to accept? Next slide. Okay, next slide. The daily question process. As promised, I'm now going to teach you something that takes 2 minutes a day, costs absolutely nothing. It's going to help get better at almost anything. Now, this is called the daily question process. I've been doing this for years. Every day, I pay a woman named Kate to call me on the phone. And every day, she listens to me read questions I wrote and provide answers I wrote every day. Why? As I said, I'm too cowardly to do this by myself and too undisciplined. This is hard to do. Now I'm going to share some of my daily questions. If you'd like all my daily questions, send me an email, marshall@marshallgoldsmith.com. I'll send you all my daily questions and an article about this process. But the important point is for you to write your own questions, not to copy my questions. One of my questions every day is, how many times yesterday did you try to prove you were right when it wasn't worth it? I almost never got a 0 in my life. Kind of hard for that old professor not to be right all the time. How many angry or destructive comments did you make about other people? Well, you want to be a nice person. Why are you bum wrapping people behind, stabbing them in the back? How many minutes did you waste on topics that you're not going to change or control? Back to that, am I willing at this time question. How many minutes did you write? Say or do something nice for your wife, your son, your daughter, your grandkids. Just a bunch of questions about life. Now, I'm going to ask everyone listening, if you don't mind, what's one question you should challenge yourself with every day? Just write that down and send it in. I love listening to people's questions. If you had to pick one question to challenge yourself with every day, what would it be? While you're doing this, my good friend Jim Moore would tell you this process saved his life. It didn't kind of save his life or sort of save his life. It did. It was one of his daily questions. Are you currently updated on your physical exam? First 90 days, he said, no. After 90 days, he said, this is embarrassing. I got to get the dumb exam or quit asking the question. Well, I got the dumb exam. What did the doctor say? You have cancer. Yeah, he knew he should have gotten a physical exam. And he's all right now. The doctor also said that if he had waited 7 more months, he'd be dead. He knew he should have got the exam. He just didn't do it. Hold that mirror in your face every day. It's very hard to hide. Very hard. Has anyone sent any questions in?
We do have a few questions. So the first is,
Good, let me hear.
who did you judge today and how did it help you and them?
Excellent question. By the way, 4 words. It should help us better at coaching and better families. Help more, judge less. Wonderful question. Next.
How much work have I done? How much work have I done toward my dissertation?
Whoa, that's so easy to put that off. Some poor dissertation person. By the way, the world's cleanest room is the room of a PhD student before that dissertation is done. We'll do anything to avoid that. Clean that room and, all chores, everything. That's so easy to put off. Give me another one.
Is this your battle?
Yeah, is this your battle? That's a wonderful question. Great questions. Well, I love listening to people's questions. Why don't we go to the next slide? Active versus passive questions. Now, my daughter Kelly is a professor at the Kellogg School of Northwestern. Some of you may have seen her before. She graduated from Duke, was on the TV show Survivor Africa. After being on Survivor, she worked with Mark Burnett 2 years. She did casting for Survivor, for The Amazing Race. And after that, she went back, got a PhD at Yale University, and now she's a professor of marketing at the Kellogg School of Northwestern. Got ranked as one of the top business school professors in the world under 40. So Daddy's very proud. And she helped me with something called active questions. Now, let me describe active questions. Next slide. An active question is a question that gets you to focus on what you can do. An active question, go to the next slide. An active question really gets you to focus on, for example, did I do my best to? Now, I'm going to share with you now my first 6 daily questions. Number 1, did I do my best to be happy? See, an active question doesn't even say you succeeded. Did you try? Most employee engagement questions are passive. Do you have clear goals? Do you have a best friend at work? Do you have meaningful work? We have passive questions. People have negative responses. They blame the environment. You can ask a question. They blame themselves. Now, did I do my best to be happy? Did I do my best to find meaning? Did I do my best to be fully engaged? Did I do my best to build positive relationships? Did I do my best to set clear goals? And finally, did I do my best to make progress toward achieving my own goals? 6 questions every day. And the results of this have just been amazing. Amazing. Next slide. Now, I want you to imagine you have to go to a meeting. A boring meeting, stupid PowerPoint slides. You're dreading the meeting. It's going to last 1 hour and you have no choice, but you have to go. We've all been to this meeting. Now, I want you to imagine at the end of that meeting, you're going to get tested. The company's not going to get tested. The presenter's not going to get tested. You're going to get tested on 4 questions. Did I do my best to be happy, to find meaning, to build positive relationships, and to be fully engaged? If you knew you were going to be tested, what is one thing you would do differently to raise your score on at least one of those 4 questions? I'd like you to send that in right now. If you knew you were going to be tested, please send in a response. What's one thing you could do different to raise your score on at least one of those 4 questions? Well, do we have any responses yet?
We do. We have a couple. The first is pay attention.
Pay attention. That's a good one. Pay attention. Be mindful. What's the next one?
Actively listen to the presentation.
Actively listen. Well, I've asked hundreds of thousands of people this question, and no one has ever said there's nothing I do different. I want to talk about how important this is. Let's go back to those two flight attendants. One's positive, motivated, upbeat, enthusiastic. One's negative, bitter, angry, and cynical. Same 3-hour flight. Who's the real loser? It's a 3-hour flight. It's not the airline. It's a tiny impact on them. And the customer, I'm asleep in 5 minutes. I could care less. The loser on that 3-hour flight is the flight attendant. 3 hours of that person's life got spent in misery. Well, if you're in that meeting for an hour and you're cynical and angry and bitter, the loser's not the company or the presenter, it's you. It's your hour. The nice thing about getting old is you realize we don't have that many hours left. Very important to realize I got to do my best to make this a great hour, to be happy, to find meaning, build relationships. And just challenging yourself is going to help you do that. Okay, next slide. Now, if you're interested, you're going to be invited to participate in a 2-week study. And if you want to participate, send me an email right now. And all the email says is, Marshall, just say 6 questions, 6 and a question mark. That's all you have to do, and I'll sign you up for the study. 6 questions or 6 and a question mark. And every day you're going to get an email for 10 working days, and you're going to be asked to test yourself on these 6 questions. Next slide. So far, this research, we've done 79 studies with 2,537 participants. 37% of the people in our first 79 studies said, I got better at everything. 65% said I got better on 4 of the 6 items. 89% said I got better at some. 11% said no change, and almost nobody, 0.7%, went backward. Why? Every day, these 6 questions get me to focus not on what I cannot change. Every day, they get me to focus on what I can change. So if you'd like to be part of our research, just send me an email. I'll be happy to sign you up. We've done this with thousands of people. And the odds on this not working are very, very low. Very, very low. Now, finally, I'm going to ask you, do you have any questions for me? If you have any questions for me, what would they be? Please send them in. And then while you're sending in your questions, what I'm also going to do is I'm going to ask my presenter to save about 4 minutes at the end, because I'm going to have a final question that final question I'd like to answer is, what's my best coaching advice for everyone who's listening? So before I get to that, though, are there any questions you would have for me? And while we're waiting, my fine presenter, why don't you ask me a good question?
Marshall, we do have a question. The first is, it's a bit about your background. How did you become a coach?
Well, I'll tell you my story. Years ago, I was a college professor, and I met a very famous man named Dr. Paul Hersey. And I'm glad you asked this question, because it brings up something else I wanted to talk about, but I forgot. Dr. Paul Hersey is a wonderful man, and he invented with Ken Blanchard the term situational leadership. I got to follow Paul Hersey around and kind of try to learn to do what he did. And, you know, as a professor, I taught it every now and again. And one day he became double booked by mistake, booked to be 2 places at the same time. He called me and said, Marshall, can you do what I do? I said, Paul, I don't know. He said, look, I need help. Can you do this? I said, I don't know. He said, I'll pay you $1,000 for 1 day. I was making $15,000 for 1 year. You know what I said? Sign me up, coach. I did a program for the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company here in New York City. I just saw their former CEO last night, and it's very nice to see him again. And got ranked first place of all the speakers. Well, they were angry when I came because I wasn't him, but then I got ranked first place. They called Paul and said, send Marshall back. Paul says, Marshall, you want to do this again? I said, Paul, sign me up, buddy. I'm happy to do this as much as you want to ask me to do it. Well, that's how I got into executive education. Then executive coaching, I was working with a guy who's the CEO of a big company, and he said, you know, got this young guy working for us, young, smart, dedicated, hardworking, driven to achieve, arrogant jerk. He said, it'd be worth a fortune to me if I could turn that guy around. So again, I hear the term fortune. I said, I like fortunes. Maybe I could help him. He said, I doubt it. I said, maybe I could help him. He said, I don't think so. That's when I came up with my idea. I said, I'll work with him for a year. If he gets better, pay me. If he don't get better, it's all free. He said, sold. That's how I got into coaching. All my coaching, I only get paid for results, not as judged by me or the person I'm coaching. It's judged by everyone around the person I'm coaching. And that's how I got into it, purely by accident. There was not even a term called coaching back then. So I was in executive coaching before the executive coaching existed. So a very good question. And by the way, there's something I forgot. I'm going to give everybody a second invitation, speaking of coaching. I went to a program recently, and it was about designing the life you love. And one exercise I did was really profound. I said, who are your heroes? So I wrote down my heroes. Then why are they your heroes? I wrote down why. And then this woman said, well, cross out your own name, write in their name. Or cross out their name, write in your name. Why don't you be like them? All my heroes were teachers like Paul Hersey I mentioned, or Ken Blanchard, or Peter Drucker, Francis Hesselbein, Alan Mulally, and they all taught me so much, and none of them ever charged me anything. I said, you know what, I want to be more like them. So what I'm going to do, and you're all invited to apply, is I'm going to adopt about 15 potential coaches, teachers, whatever, people like me, and I'm going to teach them all I know for free. So I'll teach you everything I know for free. Spend 6 or 7 days, plus available for any mentoring you want, all no charge. The only payment is you have to agree to do the same thing when you get old. You have to agree to do the same thing when you get old. And for me, it's a way to kind of recognize the people that helped me in my life, who were my heroes and gave so much to me. And maybe I can give a little bit back to other people in the same way that they gave things to me. The goal is not to create some little small version of me. I'm certainly not a mini Peter Drucker or Paul Hersey. The goal, though, is that every day I use what they taught me. So hopefully, to teach you stuff that you can use in your own life and in your own way. So if any of you would like to apply for this, send me an email, Marshall@marshallgoldsmith.com, and just write down 15 coaches, and I'll be happy to get you an application. It'll be a couple months, but you'll get an application. So thank you very much. Anything else before we wrap up?
We do. We have quite a few more questions. Another one is, what are some examples of passive questions?
Do you have meaningful work? Do you have clear goals at work? Do you have a best friend at work? The passive questions are questions that really lead you to think about the environment. Not bad, by the way. It can be very useful. They don't get you to focus on yourself. The did I do my best to question gets you to focus on yourself. If you ask a person, are you happy? And they say no, then you say, why not? My boss is a jerk. Or they'll talk about environmental factors. If you ask them, did you do your best to be happy? They look at themselves. Excellent question. Okay, next question.
How easy have you found it to challenge machismo? What's your best tip for helping macho managers to become more self-aware? And this is from one of our viewers who is a female coach with several years of experience.
I have everyone get confidential feedback. Then I sit down with them. I describe a coaching process that, it's pretty simple. They learn to talk to people, follow up. I facilitate they apologize for their mistakes, and then they have clear rules. If you want to do what I'm going to teach you, I'm happy to work with you. If you don't, goodbye. Because I've learned one thing. My key to success is great customers. If I pick the right customer, my coaching process always works. I pick the wrong customer, it never works. So I only work with people that care, and I make no attempt to change people that do not care. Now, I'm not suggesting you should do what I do. I'm just telling you what I do, and that is I only work with people that care. My job is helping successful people get even better. And I only work with the ones who are willing to get feedback, listen to people, apologize for mistakes, put in the hard work required to change. I'm not here to judge anyone. I just don't work with them. Thank you. Next slide. Or next question, excuse me. Next question.
And Dr. Goldsmith, you mentioned that you learn the most while coaching. So do you have a valuable lesson, one in particular that might be the most valuable that you've learned as a coach?
Yes, it's the biggest problem of all the coaches I've trained over the years, is including myself, is the ego of the coach. We want people to get better so we can look in the mirror and feel good about ourselves. It's very important to get over that egotistical, it's all about me stuff, and realize the key to success in coaching is not the coach, it's the client. And if you have the right client who tries, who cares, who works hard, your job as a coach is a pleasure. You have a client who doesn't care and you care more than them, it's useless. And it's very easy to understand this and very hard to do it. Sometimes many coaches get into the savior complex. And for example, if a person's name is Joe, I have them raise their hand and say, my name is Joe, not Jesus Christ. Well, don't try to save people that don't care. Really focus as a coach with people that do care. And also, I like my job of helping successful people get better. because the people I work with can make a huge difference for everyone in the whole organization. Very good question. Next question.
Looking back, what is a question you would want your 20-year-old self to ask himself every day?
20-year-old self looking back every day. Good question. I would say, am I willing to challenge what makes me comfortable? The best advice I didn't listen to came from my friend Dr. Hersey, and I was young and I was making a lot of money, and he called me and he said, "You're too good at what you do. You make too much money, you're too good at what you do, and you're not really investing in your long term. You're not writing, you're not thinking, you're just like a hamster going in a hamster cage. You make a lot of money and you're doing a good job, but you're not becoming the person you could be." That was the best advice. I didn't listen to that for 12 years. I just lived out that prophecy. I was like the hamster in the cage for 12 years. And I made a lot of money and I did good work. I was not becoming the person I could be. Finally, I met Peter Drucker and Frances Hesselbein and really focused on writing and thinking and becoming more the person I could be as opposed to the person I was just repeating over and over again. Very hard when we're comfortable and successful to challenge ourselves. Very hard. So, excellent question. Thank you. Next question.
Great, and we have time for probably two more. The next is, can self-confidence and humility coexist harmoniously?
The answer to that question is definitely yes. People that demonstrate humility to me tend to show that they have more self-confidence. Any leader that can stand up and say, "My name is, I need to improve, please help me," is not a weak leader, it's a strong leader. The people I mentioned, that Frances Hesselbein, Mulally, people like that, a lot of humility and tons of self-confidence. Next slide. Next question, excuse me.
And a final question, how do you make yourself visible to those around you that you want to have see you? It's related to the feeling that one person is hidden, the value of that person is hidden, and it seems to be most of the time people who appreciate my value are not the ones that I need to get where I want to go.
Excellent question. Back to my good Peter Drucker advice. Every decision in life is made by the decision maker. They don't have to buy, you have to sell. Many people, especially in the coaching profession, and especially women, have issues with self-promotion. Self-promotion. They have this phobia about promoting themselves. What I teach people is, look, if you believe in the product, don't be ashamed to sell it. If you believe in the product, don't be ashamed to sell it. And we have this ridiculous belief of, if I do good work, my good work should speak for itself. That's ridiculous nonsense. If that were true, no company would need a marketing function. All they'd have to do is make good products, and somebody would instantly leap over and buy them. Well, they have a marketing function because they need to do marketing. You are like that company. You need to be your own marketer and get over that self-promotion phobia, that kind of disease that says my good work should speak for itself. God is not going to come down from the sky and take care of you because of your good work. And God's probably got better things to do today than worry about your sense of being promoted. So really focus on, in a positive way, how can I influence decision makers? If you can do it, great. If you can't do it, leave. Go someplace else. But don't leave until you have someplace to go. Okay, finally, if you don't mind, I'd like to finish with my best coaching advice. Take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. I want you to imagine you're 95 years old and you're just getting ready to die. If you're on that deathbed, here comes your last breath. Right before you take that breath, you're given a beautiful gift. The ability to go back in time and talk to the person listening to me right now. The ability to help this person be a better leader, or much more important, have a better life. What advice would that wise old 95-year-old you, who knows what mattered in life and what didn't, have for the you that's listening to me right now? Well, whatever you're thinking now, do that. Some friends of mine interviewed old folks who are dying, got to ask this question: what advice would you have? On the personal side, 3 themes. Theme number 1, 3 words: be happy now. Not next week, not next month, not next year. Be happy now. Great Western disease, I'll be happy when I get the money status BMW. Common comment from old people: I got so busy chasing what I didn't have, I couldn't see what I did have when I had everything. Learning point number 2, friends and family. I'm sure you work for wonderful companies. When you look around your deathbed, none of your coworkers are waving goodbye. You realize your friends and family are pretty important. They're the only ones that care. Learning point 3, if you have a dream, go for it. Because if you don't go for it when you're 35, you probably won't when you're 85. Doesn't have to be a big one, maybe a little one. Go to New Zealand, speak Spanish, play the guitar. Other people think your dream is goofy. Who cares? It's not their dream, it's your dream. I had a very embarrassing experience a couple of years ago. I was teaching my class and I said, go to New Zealand, speak Spanish. The guy raised his hand. He goes, we're in Spain, you idiot. We all speak Spanish. Business advice isn't much different. Life is short. Have fun. Have fun. Number 2, do whatever you can do to help people. And the main reason to help people has nothing to do with money or status or getting ahead. The main reason to help people is much deeper. The 95-year-old you will be proud of you because you did and disappointed if you don't. And the final advice also is go for it. Your world's changing, your industry's changing. Do what you think's right. You might not win. At least you tried. Old people, we almost never regret the risk we take and fail. We always regret the risk we do not take. And the final thing I'd like to say, it's been my privilege to work with you today. I hope you found our little time together to be practical and useful. And my goal, hopefully, help you have just a little bit better life. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Marshall Goldsmith, for taking the time today to share how we can make a conscious changes in our behavior to make ourselves better and our lives better day by day. And thank you for all of the listeners who tuned in. The learning doesn't stop here. We will have a recording of the webinar available on our website, so you can revisit Dr. Marshall Goldsmith's presentation and use his tools such as the Wheel of Change and the daily question process. Also, again, please visit marshallgoldsmith.com, and you can email him at marshall@marshallgoldsmith.com with any future questions. And for any questions about Hult International Business School and our programs, please feel free to reach out to us at hult.edu or your enrollment director. Thank you again, Dr. Marshall Goldsmith.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.